Alrighty, beautiful people, here we are, Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 4 reaction.
Boo.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll get into it. So currently we're baking some banana bread because after that episode we need a little sweetness in our lives. I thought the episode started off really strong. I liked the vibe of it, like, oh yeah, you were celebrating finally, like, after all this doom and gloom for the past 7 seasons. Like, we're having some nice fun times, getting a bit of like a red wedding vibe before all the like madness happens.
I'm convinced they replicated the lighting.
Yeah, it definitely had that earthy tone, and yeah, I enjoyed that bit, like the drinking game comeback with Tyrion and the gang. Jon getting like tussled by Tormund. It was adorable. I enjoyed that part, but I think everything after was just like, oh my god. It was at once, it felt like a filler episode. At the same time, it was developing too many things all at once, and it went too fast, and they tried to do all this crazy character development in one episode, particularly for Dany.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that happened like really fast, and it was just so sloppy that it was like just kind of shocking.
Yeah.
It really wasn't good. I had the same sentiment overall, that I was enjoying it at first, and then they started doing just one weird thing after another, like one giant change, and it's really leading me to believe that the last 2 episodes are just not going to be good, because like they're just doing all these major changes abruptly, and we're not left with time to process them really.
Yeah.
And it just seems like they're trying to steer everything to a really quick finish, and there's a disregard for quality, I think.
Yeah.
And there was that funny article where they found the fucking coffee cup,
The Starbucks cup.
in a shot. Like, this is one of the most successful television series of all time, and in their last episodes they have silly mistakes like this.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, how much money are you putting into these? Unless it's like a gag thing for some reason. Like, oh, look at this fun little. But
I wouldn't
HBO,
be surprised if that gets claimed retrospective.
No, they said it wasn't a Starbucks cup. But I don't know what else they've said about it. They were just like, it's not Starbucks. That's it.
Right, like as if that improves any aspect of it. It's like it's still a coffee cup in a fucking medievalist fantasy show. And the thing is that people think that the fans are nitpicking about that. They're not. That was just symptomatic of the broader suckage of this episode, and frankly, this season so far. Like, I remember I made that comment to you, like, where I said, compared to this episode 3 was amazing.
Yeah.
And we all kind of know what I said last time about that one, so.
And yeah, because episode 3 at least had the production value going for it. Whereas this one, like, okay, and I also really like the look of the last scene with Cersei on the gate and, overlooking, and it was just really, like, majestic. And then with, like, the 5 Unsullied who made it through all the trials from Essos and Winterfell. But yeah, I think, like, the problem now with the show is that the back end is so visible to us now. Like, they do so much of the behind the scenes explanations, and like and we know from interviews that they have a set ending, perhaps, from George R.R. Martin, and they're trying to get to that point. And people are constantly nitpicking the creators and, the production of it. And so the story is kind of lost there. And that's kind of the problem with what's going on right now, is that people can see, it's so obvious that they're trying to push the narrative a certain way. Like, Dany's sort of villainous turn this episode was so obvious, and you can just imagine, like, the director telling Emilia Clarke, like, okay, this is where you really got to ramp up, like, your little snarl face there.
Yeah, do your crazy eyes, Emilia.
Yeah. Which she does, like, really well. But yeah, so that takes you out of the whole game, right? And in season 1, the most amazing part of it was the storytelling, and the fact that it was so unpredictable, and you couldn't see the machinations because you were immersed in the story rather than how are they going to finish this season. And part of it is due to the amazing success, but it's also like the way they've handled creating the story. So
yeah, there's definitely something to be said about the fact that you have to use your imagination a little bit, and when you leave none of that to the fans anymore, it just kind of stinks. I think the only thing that I'm looking forward to right now is banana bread that we're gonna have.
Oh my god.
For Game of Thrones, not so much.
Yeah, no. I mean, I was literally ranting about the King's Landing scene when Dany is like, what stupidity. And I was also a little drunk when that happened. She rides in with two of her two dragons, the serene look on her face, and she's like, oh, there's King's Landing and I'm gonna conquer this place, and woohoo, look at me with my invincible nuclear weapons. And it's like the middle of daylight and she's right above King's Landing, and then one of the dragons just dies from a battalion, an armada of Greyjoy ships that supposedly come out of nowhere. It's like they took a leaf from Arya's book and just sprung out of nowhere. They're all nobody, apparently, no ones. And it's just like, it makes no realistic sense. Slash end rant.
I wish I had more to say about the episode and my predictions for the future, but I'm at the moment so dispassionate about this whole series that
there's our banana bread.
I have no idea. I want to. Okay, we'll be right back. Well, we're back from banana bread. So as I was saying prior to banana bread, I've just become really disengaged with the show because of this episode. I just don't see how they're going to make the next two like satisfying, not just from an entertainment standpoint, because I think that's definitely suffered. Everyone kind of agrees on that point. But just like you said, you've used that word narratological before. I think narratologically, it's the first time I've ever said that. I think that's just gonna not pan out in a way that makes sense. And then there's that distressing, assuming this is a rumor, I have no idea whether or not this is true, that the ending of the show will match George's ending that he's making. I hope that that's not actually the case, because I think that the way it's going to be rendered is so bad. And then it's also spoiling the books.
Yeah.
Right? And
I think David and Dan would not do that, because then they would just get butchered by all the hardcore Game of Thrones, like A Song of Ice and Fire fans.
Yes.
Once after they've read the entire series, they just retroactively just murder the two of them, you know?
Yeah.
Because that would kind of ruin things, I think. But
I think for fans of the book series, rather, there's still a lot of this hope and like in the mystery as to how things are going to turn out, because there's only 5 of the 7 or 8 books that there's going to be. How many of their books are supposed to be?
I think there's supposed to be two more in this series, so it's Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring. Yeah,
and so. And for all we know, those are going to be, the typical 1,000-page or epics. So, for all we know, there could be so many more intricacies in terms of plot lines, and just the way that the books have unfolded is quite different than the show.
Oh yeah, totally.
At this point, I mean, the show is almost like we've said it several times, I think, in our previous episodes. It's like an adaptation of. Like a fan fiction rather.
Yes.
Of the books. So, yeah, I don't have at this point an optimistic viewpoint anymore. It's interesting because I think I had one after like the first couple episodes, and then it's just how starkly that's changed.
Yeah,
is in itself kind of remarkable. So,
actually, just bringing a bit more positivity into this is Bronn's scene with Jaime and Tyrion. I just want to like bring that one up again, because I literally felt like I went back to season 1 to 4 in that span of time, because the actor who plays Braun is just so good at it, and he does like the fast quips and things like that, and I just felt like it went back to the sort of natural and non-contrived manner of the old Game of Thrones. And that's like the one word I would use for this episode, is contrived. You could just tell everything was just set up.
Yeah, even the scripting just seems very canned.
Yeah.
Boring. It's
yeah.
Anyway, at this point, this has just been like an immolation. If there was an effigy of Game of Thrones that we could burn, there would be one right now, I think.
Yeah, and we'll do that in the name of Shireen Baratheon.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Rest in peace.
So I think that there's so much more we can say to just demolish this episode even further, but I think that would be a little bit unfaithful. I think despite what I've just said about being very not optimistic anymore, there's still this sliver of hope. I think though my expectations have been greatly reduced.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of looking forward to it just being over, just so that way I can say that I watched this whole series and know how it ended. Because there's not really many that I have had that experience with before, so
yeah,
this should be quite we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I've heard that episode 5, like episode 9 in the previous seasons, is like the game changer sort of episode where everything's supposed to happen. It's the catalyst. So we'll see you for the next one then, for episode 5. We're just gonna call it episode 4 because it was that terrible.
I think it's just
leave it at that.
I think it's just gonna be episode 4. WAT.
If you have any comments or opinions that you want to let us know, please leave them in the comments down below. So we'll catch you later. Peace. If you like this episode of our podcast, you can follow us on our social media to get updates on our future episodes. On Facebook, we're at facebook.com/highfantasypodcast. On Instagram, we're at highfantasypodcast. And on Twitter, we're at podcast_fantasy. And don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube as well. Thanks.